Hey there, this is Paula from the Afford Anything podcast, and the interview that you are about to hear is special bonus material that I recorded live on stereo. So if you want to hear my special live stereo interviews, head to stereo.com/PaulaPant, download the app, follow me there, and you can listen to these interviews live. Now, with that said, on to the show.
Paula Pant.
JD Roth!
Holy
How are
moly,
you?
that is a loud and great. You're obviously doing better than I am. Yeah, I turned it down. Wow.
Am I loud or am I just enthusiastic?
Both. Plus, I'm tired and groggy, so, there's a combination going on there. I love it.
You need some coffee, sir.
I do. I already had my coffee. Now I'm on the diet soda, which I know is bad for me, but it's a crutch.
I'm on the diet soda kick too. Like I have cut the vast majority of my alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
But so my thinking is, with my alcohol significantly reduced, I'm giving myself permission to drink diet soda as a substitute.
Absolutely. I figure it's like one of the least offensive bad habits you can have. Yeah, I understand there are issues, but come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, JD, we just aired your podcast episode around the 7 stages of financial independence.
Excellent.
So far, I believe it's a hit, or at least we haven't gotten any complaints that I know of.
Nobody's saying, who is this bozo?
Exactly. You know what? The one thing that is registered is we need a better photo of you, because that podcast episode is going to get aired on YouTube.
Oh.
And all the photos we have of you are super outdated.
Well, they're back from when I was young.
You're still young.
No, I guess that's true. No, I've got my 52nd birthday coming up, and I can't. I didn't used to have full-on gray hair, but all my hair is gray now.
I noticed that you've got like a Santa Claus sheet going on.
Yeah, that's right. So, all right, I will get you a more current photo. Happy to do that.
Yeah. The photos we've got that photo of you wearing braces. That's like from
right,
forever ago.
Yes, exactly.
We've got a photo.
It's 8 years old.
We've got another photo of you where I think this is before you had lost all of that weight, and you're like counting money from jars at a table.
Right, that's even older. That's from like 2008 or 2009.
Yeah, so just prove to us that you still exist.
I will do it. Send Paula a photo. Got it. So tell me about this stereo thing, because this is new to me, and I see that there are people on listening, but it's like I've never done this before.
Oh, well, welcome to stereo. So the people who are listening live.
Wow.
And it's a chance, when you hear an interview on a podcast, those interviews they're pre-recorded, and there's multiple takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and there's editing, and you hear this like kind of glossy, perfected version of a conversation.
Right.
On stereo, you can just hear these conversations happen live and in the moment. So there's more of an opportunity to get unfiltered thoughts and ideas.
and to see actual personality. Well, and
exactly.
Your audience probably doesn't. Your audience might not know this, but I do, because I know people behind the scenes. Is your podcast editor has told me in the past that you create one of the most professional, polished podcasts that he works with, and he's told me that the material you give him to edit, he's like, I don't have to do much with this. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that, because you'll ask him to charge you less. But yeah, so you're producing this polished, professional show, and so this is a chance for people to get to know you, I bet.
Oh wow. Well, I'm flattered to hear that, because I feel like we do a lot even in post-production. Like what Steve gets is that's the result of the prep that we've done in pre-production plus the actual recording itself. Steve then edits it. But then after that, there's still like a significant amount of post-production where we do cuts and restarts. And, if there's something that I've said that I can tighten up a little bit, I'll tell him to cut. Sometimes it'll be as precise as, hey, can you just cut these 5 words? Because here's a way that I can tighten up this sentence.
Yeah.
So, it's very much like the way that you would edit a piece of writing, except in audio form.
That's exactly what I was thinking. You and I both love to write. We both have writing backgrounds, and we both understand that editing is like 80% of writing. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing with audio.
Exactly. So, I guess we should talk about money since that's what we've promised.
All right, let's do it.
Since that is the title of the show.
That's right.
See, this is the pre-interview chatter that in an actual interview would get edited out.
Yes. We spend like 20 minutes or half hour, depending on how much time is available, just chatting about nothing.
Exactly.
That's how a podcast works. Yeah.
Exactly. So behind the scenes, this is the stuff we talk about before we get to the meat of the conversation that in a normal podcast gets edited out. But this is what it is, live and unfiltered. All right. So money. So JD, one thing that you mentioned, I do have some follow-up questions about this. So you mentioned that you've got a big chunk of your net worth tied up in your personal residence.
Yes, that's right.
And that, the fact that that's tied up in your personal residence means that you obviously can't draw down from it in order to live on it, even if you wanted to.
Right.
So do you feel that was a mistake? Like if you could go back and do it differently, would you? Or would you keep this money tied up in your personal residence because of the fact that that means that you don't have a mortgage payment? So your expenses
there's
are lower.
pros. Yeah, there are pros and cons to both options, Paula. And honestly, I'm smiling because this is a debate that my girlfriend Kim and I are having right now. It's a huge life decision that we're making in this moment. Even in the time since you and I recorded the interview, which wasn't that long ago, like 2 weeks. We've made some big decisions. So yeah, as you said, most of my net worth is tied up in this house. We paid, not most of my net worth, but a large chunk of it, a large chunk of what could be the free cash flow for me to live on. So we bought the house for $450,000. We put over $100,000 into repairs and upgrades. And so that's a large chunk of money to just have tied up where it's not doing anything. Sure, it's gaining value. I'm gaining equity, but I could really use that money for free cash flow to get me from, I'm almost 52, and I have 7.5 years before I can access my retirement accounts without penalty. It would be nice to have that money to be able to fund my lifestyle. So we just reached a decision last weekend that we are going to sell this place. And
what? Whoa!
Yeah. So this is like fresh news, hot off the press. I haven't shared it publicly with anyone yet.
Exclusive. Yeah. You heard it here first.
That's right. We're going to sell this place. We don't know exactly where, like looking 2 years down the road, we don't know where we'll be. We're going to sell this place, rent some place, and then make a considered decision about what we buy next. Kim has a good job, so we can use her income to qualify for a mortgage, small mortgage, and then we'll use a chunk of the money that we get from selling this place as a down payment, and that'll allow us then to make a huge down payment, carry a small mortgage, and free up some cash for me, and we should be able to get into roughly an equivalent house, if that makes sense. Something about the same value.
Wow. In the same location?
We don't know. We do love this location. You've been here. You know what it's like. It's kind of just, it's close to Portland, but it's out in the middle of the country. So it's nice. But at the same time, we're both adventurous. We did that 15-month RV trip across the United States, and we saw all these different places. We like Savannah, Georgia. We like Colorado. There are all these different places that we'd like to live. So we don't know where we're going to be. I've been on Zillow looking at houses in like Omaha, Nebraska, and I can live like 3/4 of a mile from Warren Buffett, get this nice, gorgeous house on a 1/4 acre for $300,000. I'm like, why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
But I don't know anything about Omaha.
So interesting. Okay, so tell me, so what's interesting to me about this, and I think probably interesting to people who are listening, is that for a lot of people, the idea of having a fully paid off home, particularly in your 50s, like in your retirement, the idea of having a home that is fully paid off seems like the dream. It seems like the goal. And you're
Right.
going in the opposite direction. You're almost 52. Your home is fully paid, free and clear. And you are now on the verge of going into an equivalent home with roughly an equivalent value, but
Right.
doing so with a mortgage.
Right.
Talk a little bit more about that, because I think that that's counterintuitive to what people would expect to hear from somebody who is going into early retirement in their 50s.
Sure. Well, again, a lot of it has to do with the cash flow. So I have $200,000 in accessible accounts that can fund my lifestyle between now and 59 and a half. So if you do the math, 200,000 divided by 7.5 is some number that I'm not going to come up with off the top of my head, like $25,000, something like that. $25,000 a year, but my lifestyle costs more than that. So I've managed to put myself in a position where I'm, as we said in the show, I'm the equivalent of the financial security, I think is what I call it, the stage where I have enough to fund my basic lifestyle for the rest of my life, but not my current lifestyle. So what I'm trying to do is free up some cash that will allow me to fund this lifestyle. And at the same time, we have to talk about how mortgage interest rates right now are very, very low. I haven't looked at them yet because we're not to the purchase point, but my understanding is they're somewhere around 3%. And if I were to invest that money in the stock market, let's say, in an index fund, I know that historically, and this doesn't make it true all the time, but historically, I would generate much higher returns than 3%. So it'd be kind of a win-win. I'm freeing up some cash to fund my lifestyle now, but I'm also putting the money someplace where it can earn more than it costs us to carry the mortgage.
But okay, so somebody recently called the podcast, and he posed this question, and he was like, "Oh, I don't want to take out a 30-year loan at the age of 35, because then it's not going to get paid off until I'm 65 if I just make the minimum monthly payments."
Right.
Can you talk through the psychology? Now, I'm not insinuating that you're old, but can you talk through the psychology?
No, allow me to do that. I will insinuate that I'm old.
of taking out a 30-year mortgage at the age of 52.
Well, first of all, I mean, if we carried the mortgage until we died, it doesn't bug me. I mean, it doesn't bother me in any way. It's a low interest debt at this point. But also, I know that based on who we are, my girlfriend and I, we would do what we could to pay that mortgage off before the 30 years were up, if that makes sense. And also, she and I, we have a history of moving around. We both move around quite a bit. I didn't realize this, but yeah, since we've been together, it's not that we're nomads necessarily, but we're not staying put the average of 7 years that you always hear that people stay put in a home. We're only averaging about 3 years. And so I don't know. It may be that we choose, Paula, to rent and just say, you know what, let's just rent for several years and just explore the country slowly. I think it'd be fun to, live in the Denver area for 6 months, and then maybe go back to Savannah for 6 months. And we've never been to New England. Maybe it'd be fun to live there for 6 months too.
Right. Well, and renting for a few years as a retirement hobby, like that makes a lot of sense to me because it's a travel lifestyle. But again, going back to the financial piece of this, which is,
oh yeah,
I think what the listeners are interested in.
Sure. Well, part of it is when you're making financial decisions, there are decisions that are maximally optimal, to use a silly phrase, the decisions that make absolutely the most sense from a financial point of view. But you have to balance that with what you want out of life and what your priorities are and what your psychology is. And I think we talked about this in the show that I'm a big fan, for example, of the debt snowball, Dave Ramsey's version of the debt snowball, where you pay off low balances first instead of high interest rates. And that really bugs some people because it's not the mathematically optimal way to do it. But I'm okay with it. And I'm okay making financial decisions that aren't mathematically optimal if they maximize what you want out of life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think this is one of those cases.
Yeah, that reminds me of something Joe Saul-Sehy often says, and he's quoting Stephen Covey when he says it, which is start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Right. So you start with a decision around what type of life you want to live, and then you make financial decisions accordingly.
Yeah, and with the understanding, of course, that the end may change along the way.
Right. So then, how the title of this talk is the 7 stages of financial independence. How do we, like, you're in that stage that is referred to as financial security, where you have enough money at this point that the home that you're in right now, at least, is paid off free and clear. And you've got enough in investments that you could support a basic bare bones cost of living, not your current standard of living. But, if Armageddon were to strike, you could still buy groceries. You could still keep the heat and the lights on. You would be okay, right? Your home's totally paid off. And in a worst case scenario, you'd be able to survive. Like it wouldn't be great, but you could do it.
Sure.
Right. So in that regard, you've got financial security. Can you talk about like the last 3 stages of financial independence? That's with the transition from security to, you call it like quote unquote financial independence. I don't like that. I don't like, I kind of think of the last 3 stages as like the spectrum of being in financial independence.
Right.
Like,
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so one way to look at it is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, a lot of people in the financial independence community use the terms lean fire and fat fire. And so the stage that I call financial security, that's kind of like lean fire. And the stage I call financial independence, that's just, your normal financial independence where you're funding your current lifestyle for the rest of your life. And then the stage that I call financial abundance, that's like fat fire, where you have more than enough to do whatever you want.
Right. But how does that work if your current standard of living changes, though? So, like, when I reached FI, at the time that I reached FI, like, my investments were enough to cover my current standard of living. But since then, my standard of living has increased.
Right. So have you dropped to financial security now, or are you still, well, you consider it all financial independence?
Yeah, I mean, I consider all of that financial independence. Like that lean FI to fat FI spectrum is all FI. It's all financial independence. Right. But I'm definitely like lean FI. I don't live a lean FI lifestyle, but my assets are enough to support lean FI. And if I choose to live bigger than that, then, I can choose to use active income to live bigger than that, but I know that I always have lean FI as an option to fall back on.
Right. And I think this is a good point. It's not like you're stuck in any particular stage permanently. As you make decisions in life, as your priorities change, as your situation changes, you're going to move around these stages, or at least most people will, I think. And a good example of this would be that if I decided, I'm just going to go back to work and take a standard job, and we'll stay in this house, I would be magically financially independent again. Because
right.
Between the combination of my income and the money I have already saved, I'd have plenty to get by for the rest. I mean, I wouldn't even have to touch the money that's in my investment accounts. I would just live off the income that I generated.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. So then how do you square that with, like, in the public discourse, FI is talked about as this fixed static point.
Right.
Do you think that's just a mistake of the public discourse?
Yeah, I think it's too rigid. It's too rigid of a way of looking at this. Again, the whole point of this continuum, these 7 stages of financial independence that I talked about, these 7 stages are largely arbitrary. To me, there are a multitude of stages. You could break this down even further and say, once you achieve this, you have a greater degree of financial independence. The whole point of this is the more money you set aside and the lower you keep the cost of your lifestyle, the greater financial independence you are going to achieve. And that is just going to snowball. I call it the wealth snowball that you're building. The bigger your wealth snowball, the greater financial independence you have. And that just, for most people, increases over time.
Right. When you talk about, like, kind of the last 3 stages where that spectrum of lean FI to fat FI, and how people
right.
sort of shift around, from that lean FI, the stage 5 to stage 7, right? People will shift from lean FI to fat FI throughout their life. Like, once you reach FI, as your current standard of living shifts, like, sometimes you'll be lean FI, sometimes you'll be fat FI, sometimes you'll be regular FI, but as long as you at least have lean FI as a worst case scenario, like, as long as that option is there, then you're at least FI, as I see it.
Right.
Right. Do you think that these distinctions, we're kind of sitting here, as we sit here talking about these stages and talking about, like, the distinctions between these stages, like, do you feel the effect of that in your own life as you shift from stage to stage, or is this largely just a vocabulary that we use to talk about it when the experience of it is almost unnoticeable?
Oh, well, this is an interesting question. I mean, largely it's an arbitrary vocabulary, but absolutely, I have felt as I have moved from this standard financial independence, and now I'm lean FI, or I'm in financial security, I absolutely feel a difference psychologically, if that makes sense. I feel more stressed, to be honest, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I had myself in a position where I didn't have to worry about generating an income. Now I understand that no, I have a shortfall that I need to make up in the next 7.5 years to get me to get me to retirement age. Once I reach retirement age, everything is set. I have my retirement accounts. I have everything set up so that I should be good to go. But it's just the next 7.5 years. And I do feel a degree of stress. And that's compounded by the fact that the house we're in has needed some work and stuff. We've done most of the work on the house. But living in a home that's requiring maintenance and draining your funds, it's an interesting position to be in.
So you have felt the stress of.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting. Do you think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that if I could do it again, I think you asked me this earlier, if I could make different decisions, would I? And absolutely. I think I would not, I would have still purchased a $450,000 home, but I would have purchased one that didn't require as much work. We went into this purchase knowing that we were going to make repairs to the home and make upgrades. And that's what we've done. And we love the space. I'm standing outside on the deck right now in the strange sun here in Portland, Oregon. We don't usually have sun this time of year. It's very nice. But I would make different decisions. And I've also made some investments in startup companies, and I bought back my personal finance blog. And all of these decisions took money. They didn't actually like decrease my net worth. On paper, my net worth is exactly what it was. However, the form this net worth takes is different. The money is illiquid. And what I've learned over the past few years is I used to argue that, hey, you can base whether or not you're financially independent on just your net worth. I know that's not true now. It may be true on paper. If I sold everything, if I liquidated everything, okay, fine. But it's that free cash flow. You need that free cash flow to get you from whatever age you are right now to your retirement age or to the end of your life. That's important too. So there are multiple elements to being financially independent. And even I, as somebody who writes about this and talks about it, hadn't taken the free cash flow situation into account.
Do you think FI then, do you think free cash flow is more important than net worth when it comes to determining whether or not a person is FI?
That is a fine, fine question. And let's acknowledge that well, I don't like the word privilege, but it's a very privileged question. It's a fortunate, it's one of those good questions, right?
Right.
I don't know. To me, the net worth is always going to be the most important thing, because worst comes to worst, if you sell everything and you're just left with a pile of cash standing naked in the street, well, you're in good shape, right?
Right.
But in the day-to-day aspect of living it, you've got to take your free cash flow into account so that you are able to maintain your lifestyle or make the decisions you want to make to reach that end that you have in mind.
Right. Do you think that there's a distinction so as I listen to what you're talking about, one thing that strikes me is kind of the distinction between FI versus RE. Like, JD, you're somebody who wants to retire, like in the sense that you want the cessation of working, right?
Right.
You do not want the responsibilities associated with working. Like not it's like almost hard to phrase that without making it sound like a bad thing, you know?
I know.
But you don't want the stress, you don't want the responsibility, you want like the freedom that comes from the cessation of paid productive work. Right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you're hitting on an excellent point here, Paula. And this is something that you and I have talked about behind the scenes, is I'm at a point where, I really am ready to just say, no, I want to be retired in the traditional sense of the word retired. Right. And that means not having to work for pay. Honestly, Kim and I were just talking the other day, and it's like, you know what? I would love to take some art classes. I always was interested in art when I was younger, but I've never, ever done anything with it. And it just really appeals to me to like take some art classes and learn how to paint or to draw. And I don't know. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to pursue right now. And I don't want to be spending my days working on my personal finance blog, making YouTube videos and that kind of thing. I enjoy that stuff, don't get me wrong. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to do it. But at this point, I kind of want to shift gears And so this distinction between financial independence and early retirement, it's almost as if for the longest time I've been fine being financially independent and saying, oh yeah, this is great. But now I'm like, the retirement aspect of this whole FIRE equation, or this FIRE concept, is what appeals to me. And so I'm like trying to figure out how can I achieve that portion of it. I hadn't thought about that. That was an interesting point for you to bring up.
Right.
And
right.
You're in this position where you're like ramping up the work and you're excited about it, and that's because you're young. And
well, thank you.
No, it just, yeah. You got me sitting here staring at the sky, just like thinking, what do I want to do with my life?
Well, yeah, as I hear you talk, and you talk about the importance of free cash flow, and, you talk about how, like, some of the investments that you've made, I won't name the company, but I know that you made a $50,000 investment in a company that has, on paper, like, that's 5x, 6x at least. It's done very, very well on paper, and so on paper, your net worth is significantly higher as a result of having made that investment.
Sure.
But it's completely illiquid. You can't tap that. And from my position, when I sit here and think about it, like, for me, because I have zero desire to ever stop earning active income, for me, it's all about the net worth. Like, it's all about watching, like, putting together my net worth report. What I do that like twice a year typically, and it's all about, like, almost like putting points on a scoreboard, watching that increase, right? Like, I like the idea of that increasing, and cash flow is secondary. But that's, of course, a very different mindset from someone who,
this could be, we often talk about in the financial independence community, we talk about the accumulation phase, and then I forget the name of the second phase, but the phase where you're drawing down your money. And so you're still like actively in the accumulation phase. You're gathering money together. You're growing your net worth. And I've made the conscious decision that I want to step off the accumulation side of things and go into the side of things where I'm drawing things down. Now, that's not to say that I might not change my mind, or I might not find other projects that I want to pursue that might generate income. But it's like over the past 2 years, or let's say the 4 years since we bought this house, my mindset has changed. I've gone from the accumulation phase where you're focused on the net worth to what is the name of that second phase? It's going to
the preservation phase, the wealth preservation.
Preservation. Yes, yeah. Preservation, where instead of like trying to make things grow, I mean, obviously you want things to grow. What you're really worried about is making the wealth last as long as possible. And for me, I've made that shift, and it's changing the way I look at things and the way I think about things.
Right. And that makes sense. And then that makes sense why. Yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Here's a flaw with stereo. My phone started ringing and you went on mute.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
I'm sorry. So I didn't hear what you were saying there.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I was just thinking, just sort of reflecting on what you said and thinking about how it does make sense that if you go into the wealth preservation phase and you're no longer actively making income, then free cash flow does take on increased importance.
Mm-hmm,
and yeah, and as counterintuitive as it may sound, increasing your debt, like shifting from being debt free to consciously having debt, having mortgage debt, it will cause your expenses to increase, but it will also cause your free cash flow to increase.
Yeah.
And so if the net increase is greater free cash flow, then that makes sense from a cash flow perspective.
Right. And honestly, I feel like the net worth will continue to increase. I mean, right now, because the money is tied up in the house, the net worth increases as the real estate values in this market increase. And they've really increased a lot in the Portland area. So that's true. That's absolutely true. And if I take, say, half the money here, 300,000, and shift that to a mortgage, yes, I'll be paying out 3% interest, but I'll also have this extra 300,000, and I'll be drawing down some of that money to use for living expenses. But the 300,000 will be in additional will be in the stock market, growing to whatever the stock market does. So whether or not that's faster or slower than real estate would grow here in Portland, I don't know. There's no way to know that. But to me, it's a roughly equivalent exchange, if that makes sense. Yes, I'm taking on that 3% debt, but I'm okay with it.
Right.
What would you do in my situation? That's what I should really be asking. It's like, get the advice of somebody who's out there and is an impartial third-party observer. Well, not impartial, you're a friend, but
I don't know if I can answer that because it's hard for me to put myself in your shoes, right? Like, for a couple of reasons. Partially, like I've always had a bit of an aversion to debt generally. I certainly have. I have, a mortgage, but but I've got right now. I've got 4 units, rental units that I'm holding free and clear. And I'm doing that in like the historically best interest rate environment, of my lifetime so far.
Right.
So that's not to say I won't take out debt in the future. I almost certainly will. But my discomfort with debt runs deep, and B, again, when I think through it, it's hard. It's hard for me to separate out the decisions that I would make as a 37-year-old from as a 37-year-old who's really excited about working and growing a business and creating active income. It's just so hard for me to adjust that to the mindset of someone who's 52 and who doesn't want to grow a business and who doesn't want to make active income and who doesn't want to transition to a second career. Like, it's almost impossible for me to imagine not wanting to make some form of active income.
Well, this gets to the point that you and I've talked about before, that every person's situation is different and everyone has different priorities. And you've got to figure out there's never going to be one right best path, I think. That's my belief. There's never going to be one path that is, oh yeah, this is it. This is the right one. There are going to be multiple options. And so you've got to choose a good option. I think it's important to make smart choices, but do that with the understanding that no one option is correct. I mean, I could at this stage at 52 say, you know what? I do want to spend the next 10 years growing Get Rich Slowly and making it into a big brand. And in fact, that's what I thought I wanted to do 3 or 4 years ago. But the older I get, and the more I evaluate what's important to me and what brings me happiness, the more I realize it's spending time with my friends and my family, and pushing for work doesn't accomplish that for me. In a way, it reminds me of that parable of the Mexican fisherman. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. But for the people who are listening, they might not be. So please tell it.
Okay, I'll do my best to paraphrase this. I'll do a poor job. But it goes something like this. There's some business executive who's taking a vacation in Mexico, and he comes across a fisherman coming in on the dock. And he's got a fish and he's taking it home. The fisherman or the business executive says, "Hey, what are you doing with that?" He says, "Oh," the fisherman says, "I'm taking it home. I'm going to fry it up. I'm going to spend time with my family and friends tonight." It's like, you only caught that one fish? And the fisherman said, yeah, that's all I need. And the executive says, you know what you should do is you should get a bigger boat. Well, why do I need a bigger boat? Well, you need a bigger boat so you can catch more fish and be more effective and make more money. You can sell some of your fish. Why would I want to do that? Well, then you could buy bigger stuff. You could have a bigger house. You could have more and more and more. And the fisherman's like, why would I want to do that? And the executive says, well, then you could retire and just live this happy life where you don't have to do much all day. And the fisherman's like, well, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And I don't remember what the executive says in return. But the point is, the fisherman is already living this life that the executive is telling him he should live. But the executive's approach to it is to like make all this money and to do all this work so that you can then afford the life. Whereas the fisherman's like, no, I'm just going to live that life now. And to me, I've been reading some Buddhist philosophy and some meditation stuff because, as you know, I struggle with anxiety and depression. And so I'm really approaching the Buddhism stuff and the meditation stuff to try to treat the anxiety and depression. But as part of that, I'm learning this concept that the Buddha taught that desire causes suffering. And so it's really interesting for me to think about this and to apply it to my own life and realize, you know what, when I'm unhappy, and when he says suffering, he actually, I guess the better translation is often dissatisfaction. And the root of dissatisfaction is wanting something other than you have. And so what I've been trying to do is look around me like I am right now. I'm looking around my yard. I'm like, you know, I'm really happy here. I'm satisfied with this place. I don't need anything more than this. Or the same thing, I'm going through a spending moratorium in 2021, where I'm doing my best to not purchase books and movies and just things that I'm constantly spending money on, because I always think, oh, if I buy this book, you know, I'll really want to read it. I have hundreds of books, Paula. I need to read the books I have. I need to be satisfied with what I have. And that's going to make me happier than trying to find buy a new book or to buy a new movie. Why not just enjoy the things I already own? Anyway, that's a big, long vomit of words about the Mexican fisherman and being satisfied with what you have.
Okay, so here are the qualms that I have with the Mexican fisherman story.
Let's hear them.
All right. So first of all, there's a big difference between, like in the Mexican fisherman parable, there's a big difference between, like, yeah, sure, you can spend your days hanging out with your family, eating delicious fish, like fresh caught fish. But there's a big difference between not having the means to do anything other than that and not, you know, versus like having an infinite array of options and, you know, deciding to do that. And I think where we see this is, like, I'm thinking about my own family in Kathmandu, right? And like, if you described their lifestyle, it sounds like it's like a very low stress life. Like they're not, they don't put in as many hours at the office as people do here in the US, but they're also, a lot of them are also stuck, right? When there's an earthquake in Kathmandu, like they can't leave and they don't have funds to rebuild. When there's, you know, if I were to get married and I were to throw a wedding here in the US, they would have a hard time coming up with funds for a plane ticket, right? And so there's medical care. Like the difference in the medical care that we receive is massive, right? And so there's just a big difference between having a low stress lifestyle when you have means behind you to support yourself versus having that low hours in the office lifestyle without it. And my friend Amanda actually described it really well. So she was going through a hard time for a while, and I had a camper. I had a camper trailer. And I was like, well, Amanda, you're welcome to just live in my camper for free, you know, until you get back on your feet. Like it's just sitting here. It's not doing anything. And so she took me up on that offer. She lived there for maybe 1 or 2 months. But she was really embarrassed about it. And she was like, please don't tell anybody, you know, and I'm telling this story that's not her real name. And I know she's not going to be, nobody I know is going to be listening to this anyway. But, you know, she really did not want anyone knowing. And I couldn't understand that. I was like, why not? Like living in a camper, that sounds great. Who wouldn't want to do that? And she was like, Paula, she was like, you would enjoy it because you would choose to do it.
Right.
You know, I'm embarrassed about it because I have to do it. And that's the difference.
And this gets to, I don't know whether it's necessarily a criticism of financial independence in the FIRE movement so much as it is an observation, but it's exactly what you're talking about, that a lot of the things that we talk about doing in the financial independence movement, where we're talking about deliberately living frugal lifestyles, these are things that we are choosing to do. And people who are in poverty or people whose circumstances, through no fault of their own, are difficult, they don't have the option. They don't have the choice. And so this is something I'm always keenly aware of. I don't know what I personally can do about it, but I feel very blessed and fortunate that I'm in a situation where I'm talking about choosing to do some of these things that other people don't. They have to do them, you know?
Right, exactly. But beyond that, like I think the issue with the Mexican fisherman, the fisherman parable, is like it's almost this encouragement to keep your life small. You know, it's an encouragement to do less, to be less ambitious, to achieve less. When with a focus purely on like the day-to-day lifestyle of you know, how you could live in the moment. And I think it overlooks the consequences of what choosing to do less could mean, you know, down the road.
Well, and it downplays the value of a safety net, number one, having this insurance for your lifestyle. And also, as you and I have been talking about here for the past couple of minutes, the ability to choose. So if your priorities change, or if you decide you want something else out of life, if you're the Mexican fisherman and you haven't taken the time to build in, I don't know, extra income or savings or whatever, you don't have as many options. And that's really, to me, financial independence in the FIRE movement, what it's really about is it gives you options. It gives you choices. It lets you, it allows you to have more freedom, I guess.
Right.
It's funny, just now as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, you know, if I wanted to, I could cash everything out and I could buy, I don't know, I can't even imagine what I would spend $1 million on, but I could buy some $1 million toy, you know. I wouldn't have any money left over for anything else and I'd have to go back to work. But if I wanted to, I could do that. That's an option. Or I could also just decide that, hey, Kim, you and I, we're going to live in an RV for the rest of our lives together. We already did it for a year and a half. We can do it for another 20 years. And then all of a sudden, I'm fine. I'm financially abundant. I'm fat fire because my expenses are so low. But this is only possible. These options exist because I've managed to accumulate this much money and I'm not squandering it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And there's a certain freedom that comes from having the ability to choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, JD, we're going to end it there. It's been it's been 50 minutes, so I want to wrap this up. But thank you for taking this time to talk about all of the nuances of financial independence.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. This stereo thing. It's like a cross between a personal conversation and a podcast. It's like
exactly.
it's both at once. Yeah.
The unfiltered, unedited, live. Like if you hear the difference between this versus the actual podcast episode, I mean, it's massive. The podcast episode is a lot more edited. It's tighter. It's more concise. We're on topic more. Even the way
Yeah,
that
I'm
I throw
walking around
questions.
with my earbuds right now. I would never do that to you if I were recording a podcast. I use an actual microphone that's higher
Right.
quality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, JD.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I appreciate
Cool.
it.
Awesome. All right. And thank you to everybody who is listening. Hope that you enjoyed this live conversation, and make sure that you're following me so that you can hear, following me on stereo so that you can hear all of the conversations that we do. We do this every Friday.